Hey, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Rich Life podcast. So, today we're going to talk about the story of the Stonecutter, right? The theme of today's podcast is how do you embrace contentment and balance in a world of constant striving?
Very pertinent to the type A folks out there whose parents were upset you got a 96 out of 100. Why didn't you go for the extra credit? It was there.
Yeah, exactly. In today's world, it's very easy to fall into the trap of keeping up with the Joneses or constantly seeking more, right? You'll hit one benchmark and then you'll think, oh, what about the next bench? I think a lot of us, we fall prey to not taking the time to appreciate what we have in the moment. Elaine and I are going to read to you a story. It's an ancient Chinese parable that illustrates this lesson, and this is called the story of the stonecutter. Okay. Once upon a time in ancient China, there was a humble stonecutter. Every day he would go to the mountains to cut stones, shaping them for various purposes. Though his work was hard and his hands were calloused, he was content with his simple life. One day, while working on a massive rock, the stonecutter saw a wealthy merchant passing by. The merchant was dressed in fine silks, surrounded by attendants, and everyone admired and respected him. The stonecutter sighed and thought,
Only I were a rich merchant, I wouldn't have to live this hard life.
and to his surprise, his wish was granted and he became the wealthy merchant. As a merchant, he enjoyed luxury and comfort, but soon he noticed a high official being carried in a grand procession. The official was honored and revered far more than any merchant. The stonecutter thought,
I wish I were a high official with all the power and the respect that comes with that title.
and instantly he found himself in that position. However, one day, while overseeing his domain, he felt the scorching heat of the sun. He realized that the sun was more powerful than he could ever be, for it could affect even high officials. He thought,
How big and strong the sun is. I wish I were the sun.
and once again his wish was granted. He shone brightly, spreading light and warmth across the land. But then, a dark cloud moved in and blocked his rays. He thought,
How powerful that cloud is. I wish I were a cloud.
and so he became a cloud, floating majestically in the sky, bringing rain and relief to the earth. As a cloud, he poured rain on the fields and villages, but soon he felt a strong force pushing him. It was the wind. He realized
The wind is stronger than the cloud. I wish I were the wind.
he became the wind, blowing fiercely across the land, toppling trees and scattering leaves. Yet, when he reached the mountains, he found he could not move them. He thought,
These rocks are mightier than I am. I wish I were a rock.
and so he became a rock, steadfast and immovable. One day he felt a sharp pain. A stonecutter was chipping away at him. He thought,
The stonecutter is more powerful than the rock. I wish where I was a stonecutter.
and with that he found himself back in his original form, realizing that he was happiest and most powerful as himself.
That kind of made me feel like the old my daughter has this like rock, paper, scissors book. They just keeps going around in circles.
That I think this is a story that I think our listeners can probably have some takeaways just by listening to it.
Maybe let's bring us do some experience shares here. What are some things that you were chasing at one time and then you moved on to something else that you can recall? Because it's not as swift, right? A lot of this takes years to identify something, get it, and then move off of it.
Yeah, I can think of several examples, right? The first one would be just my career as a physician, right? When we're in school, especially when for a lot of these professions, it's a very set path, right? It's linear where you're going to be, right? After you finish this particular stage, right? So after undergraduate, you go to medical school and residency, then fellowship, then you're like out in the real world, right? And with each achievement, it felt nice, but then you're literally looking forward to the next one, to the next one. Then you just get into the real world and you realize, oh, okay, what's next? Is this everything that I was dreaming about in my career?
Do you ever recall a time of, I don't know, med school, college, or doing any of this stuff that you actually enjoyed what you were doing, or you're enjoying the moment, or you're able to take a break? And do you recall, or was it just constantly just swimming underwater?
Yeah, it was tough. There were certain things I enjoyed, but if I had to list them, it was more like my girlfriend at the time or meeting my now wife at the time.
Time's not a wasted when you're being wasted, is the old college line, but
Yeah.
Sometimes that could be the only time where you have fun and enjoy things, right?
Yeah.
Constant pursuit.
And,
And we're not advocating for that, but it's just merely using that as a illustration of how silly this all is.
yeah.
The only time you had fun when you're drinking Miller Lights. All right.
Yeah, exactly. When I was a medical resident in New York City, that's when I met my wife. She was a medical student. So yeah, you know, a little bit of Grey's Anatomy action going on. But man, I used to dread overnight calls, but things were fun.
Yeah. You look back and you can find, well, there were speckles of good times in there. Is there any like regret? Like you didn't do things more of that back then? This is just history repeats itself.
A great group of co-residents and same in fellowship. Just looking back, like we're all in the trenches together and having that shared struggle, that shared time in the trenches. Despite it, the hospital, you know, could be pretty malignant, right? In some ways, but as a group, like that's yeah, we had a great group of co-residents. We all
It,
understood each other. We're going through the same thing.
similar to like people in wartime, people are getting their heads blown off, but
Yeah.
I had some good time with those guys, right? It's
Yeah. Yeah.
similar.
Yeah, and yeah, when you share like, experiences like that, where only your colleagues in that situation can understand, that forms a bond.
Yeah. And all I know is commercial real estate been a
Mm.
doozy these last couple of years. Not to that point where it's oh great
Mhm.
times with the people, the other GPs, but I can definitely see where it gets to. But it's hard to see it when you're in it. Is the hard
Yeah,
part, right? It's almost like you don't enjoy a vacation until you come back from the vacation, which is sad.
yeah,
But naturally, I think in your med school story or that war torn story or
yeah,
the story I mentioned, that's definitely the case. You don't appreciate it until it's done.
yeah, exactly. And I noticed that when I meet up with one of my old co-residents, we tend to talk about and laugh about the different experiences, some of the crazy crap that we experienced, or funny patient stories, right? Yeah.
Those are in a way like the souvenirs,
Hmm.
right, of the
Yeah.
vacation. Unless you go through the shitty experience, you don't get
Yeah.
the souvenirs at the end.
Yeah. It's like what the book Die with Zero talks about, right? Like these memories, these are the ones, like certain memories stay in your mind. And then even though it could have been tough times at the moment, but having a group of people to share it with, it makes it meaningful and almost fun. And you relive some of the absurdity of the moment, right?
And
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like maybe it's just an indicator or
Hmm.
a ingredient of it, but you need to be in situations of difficulty, stress, risk. You can't just play it safe. Like our kids, they'll never have to get a HELOC. They don't know what the hell that is. What do you mean? My house is all paid off. My dad, gave my sister a house paid off or student loans, for goodness sake. They're never, they don't know what that is nor what it feels like to connect with
Yeah.
people on that. These
Right,
poor guys
right, right. Yeah.
don't need to go through that. So they're not going to go to that crucible where you
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
through it.
Yeah.
Lucky
Exactly.
them.
That's But yeah, a lot of these tougher experiences, you find like, a happiness and fulfillment from like these simple joys, right? Simple joys of sharing a beer with a colleague or just sharing a laugh at something crazy that happened, right?
But that's after the fact, right? After you guys went through it. And this is that's okay, Paul. I had a really easy life. I didn't have to really do anything hard up to this
Yeah.
point. I'm in my 40s and 50s. I don't have those really strong relationships because I didn't go to war with anybody. You lived a vanilla life up to this
Yeah.
point. What do you do? You're taking what we're talking about here. You need to go through some type of struggle or self-inflicted torment in
Yeah.
a way.
Yeah.
I was talking to one guy, they do this like ancient Hawaiian canoe where you go out on the ocean for days, you poop in the water and it's horrible, but it makes for great bonding with other people. Bonding creators, they're not really plentiful out there.
Yeah, I think that's why, yeah, I think experiences are great for building bonds, right? Especially for those guys out there who could be a little awkward, like talking about feelings or whatnot with a bro, right? But if you have an adventure like that where you're on a boat for days, or if you're doing a long hike or some sort of shared adventure where there's a bit of adversity, then that is such a rich building ground for developing close feelings and relationships. Right.
Yeah, I think we need to create some kind of travel company where it takes groups of guys or gals, or maybe combine the
Yeah.
two, but have there be some kind of engineered danger that's safe
Yeah.
created.
But I think going back to your original question in terms of any experiences in life where you're just constantly looking for the next thing? How about yourself? Like, what comes to mind?
I used to do this thing where I don't necessarily journal. I journal in a
Mm,
spreadsheet with dates. I did this exercise where I called it I would be happy when and it's like an acronym, IWH. I don't know what the rest is, but I would pretty religiously every like quarter write down where I would be living at, what would I be driving, things like that for a 20-year-old guy. And I would monitor this quarter after quarter over many years. And what I realized after doing this several dozen times was that this entry of I will be happy when always changed. I'm always going to be wanting to strive for something next. And when I get it, there's always going to be something next. So at that point, I was made aware of this insanity cycle. So I think that's where I'm at. I'm just aware of it. I know how to catch myself to know that, all right, if that's the next goal, then I'm going to do that. I know that can be a trap, but that's the extent of part of that. To be working for something is
mm,
good for people. Unrelated, I've
mm.
heard when people, or especially entrepreneurs, they get to a certain level of success and they don't have anything to go for, even though we talking about here how it may be a little bit unhealthy, but the opposite can be very unhealthy. If they just become a little bit wandering, they just lose their edge and they just do a whole bunch of bad stuff at that point. So I think it goes both ways.
There's definitely the danger of being directionless, aimless, without purpose, right? We see that's why we see such high rates of depression and suicide among people who retire, and so much of their identity was tied to one particular role, right? And you take that away, and all of a sudden they're aimless, and it's unbearable. At the same token, if you're always constantly striving, you're always moving the goalposts, and that can be a tragedy as well, right? If you're working so hard, achieving all these things, but deep down you're still not feeling fulfilled. You're not getting joy and like the simpler things in life. Like you're not like enjoying the relationships closest to you, or you're not taking good care of your health. So yeah, definitely it's trying to find that middle ground, right? Seeing the benefits, having that balance. The stonecutter realized he was happy being himself, but only after he went through this
It
journey, right?
it's the hero's journey.
Without that journey, he's always going to be wondering, like, oh, what if I was this? But he actually took that journey, went all the way full circle. And only by going full circle, having all these experiences, seeing that power is relative. There's always something stronger. There's always something better. No one thing is the best, right? But he went through that journey, and that's how you realize at the end, you know what? I'm content with who I am. But it required him going through that entire journey, like all those different steps.
Yeah. But that's the journey of life, right? That's for the
Yeah.
search of autonomy. I know a guy, they want to go live abroad every time, always like complaining, oh, I'm gonna do this and that. I'm just freaking go, man.
Yeah.
Just go. So you can come back and tell me, oh, wasn't that great? But at least you did it, right? And you're
Yeah.
off to the next thing. Isn't that what life is all about? You got to pay the
Yeah.
bills, you got to pay the mortgage. You got to just do it. Just go and do it, right?
Yeah,
What's
you just
holding you
have to do
back?
it. There's oftentimes no substitute for you having to do it yourself. It doesn't matter what somebody says, right? Someone could tell you, oh, you don't need to focus on all these things. The key to happiness is just having a simple home and sitting in front of a fireplace. While that may be true, you still got to go through that journey. We all have to do that journey ourselves to make mistakes and to come to that realization with our own experiences. That's my opinion.
I would agree. So to close this out, any action items that you're going to taking the lessons of the stone cutter here off the top of your head?
One that comes up is just appreciating all the different domains of life, right? So that includes even appreciating the moments of hardship, right? So appreciating that life is not a straight line, right? So it's not about getting from point A to point B in the most efficient manner, but it's really about the journey, right? Even if it zigzags, does weird spirals and goes backwards, there's value in that, right? Just like the stonecutter's journey, because each part of that journey, like he learned something about the universe and learned something about himself. And I think we can apply this to not only our lives, but also all the different people around us, right? Because like, people have different definitions of success, right? I remember When my wife and I were recently in the Maldives, I really enjoyed talking with some of the locals. What brought them to live on this remote island in the middle of the Indian Ocean? It was just so interesting to see, for example, like our dive instructor talk about why he moved from this busy city in India to the middle of the Indian Ocean. And in much the same way as we're all looking for happiness, but that's where his path led him. And he wasn't about making mass fortunes, but diving in love of the ocean. That was his way of finding happiness. Talking to people that it just makes you realize, oh, okay, there's all these different ways that all of us on this planet, we're all looking for something, right? We're all looking for success, happiness, love. Like we're all on our own journey and just like appreciating, wow, there's so many different paths you can take, right? Is one truly better than the other? It's hard to say. Yeah, but just appreciating that there's such a diversity of ways that you can go about it.
My takeaway on that case is that particular individual identified what they wanted and got off of cruise control. I think most of us are in cruise control, myself included,
Mhm.
but there can be said for writing stuff down. So my action item from today's talk is if my life is a bit of the stone cutter guy where I transform myself into all these different things and do the different things. Let me just write what I want to do. So at least I have control in it and I actually get my mileage up because I think some people may laugh at the stonecutter from making all these circuitous journey, wanting to end up where he was. But I look at it a different point of view. I'm like, wow, look at all the cool stuff this guy did. He's a freaking cloud, he's the wind. So I think I'm gonna make a point over the next week or two to jot down some things that the bucket list, the old
Yeah.
bucket list, and just bring that to the forefront a little bit more.
Yeah, love it. Just embrace the journey, right? It's not always about the destination. The more windy and more zigzaggy and the more curvy your journey is, yeah, like, that's freaking cool.
All right, folks, at the end of all these podcasts, like we want this stuff to be somewhat actionable to make some type of impact. I think if I sat for 5 minutes and jotted down what I might do, who knows, that might have changed my life in 2025 somewhat, right? I think that's we're all going for a little bit of course correction here
Yeah.
and there. Cool. See you guys next time. Bye.